If you've spent any time at all in Mexico, you've seen it. It's a simple, unassuming little sweet called an alegria. You'll find it everywhere. Small bars of puffed grain, stuck together with honey, sold in busy markets and on quiet street corners. It's light, it's crunchy, it's sweet. And nothing, absolutely nothing about it suggests that 500 years ago, this very same stuff was thought of as something else entirely. It wasn't a snack. It was the living flesh of a god. So before the Spanish ever arrived, before anyone had ever heard the word alegria, the grain itself had a different name, huautli. And in the pre-Hispanic world of Mesoamerica, huautli wasn't just important, it was fundamental, it was life itself. Now, huautli, the grain we now call amaranth, wasn't just another crop on the list. It was a foundational pillar of their civilization, right up there with maize and beans. The Mexica people, the Aztecs, they called it one of the 4 seeds of maintenance. These were the core foods that sustained everything, the individual, the community, the entire empire. It was grown in huge quantities, stored in the emperor's granaries, and paid as tax to the great capital city, Tenochtitlan. So in that sense, it was ordinary, essential, just the stuff of daily life. I mean, this one seed had so many jobs. For food, it was ground up for tortillas and warm porridges. As tribute, something like 20 tons of it a year were sent to Moctezuma storehouses. As medicine, it was used for all sorts of ailments. But it's that 4th role, the ritual one, that's where our story really takes a turn. Because for all its everyday uses, huacuacli had a second secret, sacred life. And this is where things get truly fascinating, because the Mexica discovered that if you prepared it in just the right way, with the right intention, this humble seed could become something more. The whole process was a kind of sacred alchemy, a technology of belief that could turn simple food into the very substance of the divine. They called this new substance tuetzoali. It was a dense, sticky dough made from ground amaranth and bound with the dark, rich honey from the maguey plant. And its purpose was, well, extraordinary. It was used to sculpt the literal bodies of the gods. And I want to be very clear here, this was not a symbol. It was not a metaphor. It was known, understood, and revered as the carne de los dioses, the flesh of the gods. So how did they do it? The creation of a god from Tzoali was a deeply sacred and careful process. Young women in the temple would grind the amaranth seeds into flour. That flour was then kneaded with the dark maguey honey to make the paste. And then this dough was sculpted. And we're not talking about a small statue here. We're talking about a full, human-sized figure built over a frame of mesquite wood. And finally, the god was brought to life, given eyes of precious jade, teeth made from white maize kernels, and dressed in magnificent robes and feathers. Now, just in case you think this is all symbolic, listen to what the indigenous people told the Spanish friar Sahagún in their own direct words. And from that dough, they made the body of Huitzilopochtli. The material and the divine became one. The god was no longer some distant force in the cosmos. The god was physically present. But here's the thing. This divine body wasn't made to sit in a temple and be worshipped forever. Its creation was just the beginning. For a while, the god, in its physical form, would be paraded among the people. And then the ritual would take a dramatic, almost startling turn. The god, having been made, now had to die. The figure was subjected to a ceremonial death. A priest would pierce it with a dart, its heart would be taken out, and its body dismantled. What came next was the whole point of the ceremony, an act with a specific and powerful name, Teoquelolo. The meaning is profound and very direct. The god is Ethan. The body of the god was carefully broken into pieces. The priest would then give out these pieces to the entire community, family by family, neighborhood by neighborhood, and then the people ate it. One Spanish chronicler wrote that they received their portion with reverence, fear, and tears, because to eat the Tzotzawali was to ingest the god's divine essence, to take its power, its spirit, its very being into yourself. But then new men arrived from across the sea, and they brought with them a different god and a very, very different way of seeing the world. So try to picture this. The first Franciscan missionaries arrive in what they call New Spain, and they see these rituals, and they are completely shocked. But it wasn't just that they saw what they considered pagan idolatry. No, it was something much more specific, and to them, far more disturbing. They saw a reflection, a near-perfect mirror image of their own most sacred rite. The parallels were just astonishing. Think about it. The Muskika ritual, a dough made from grain that through a ritual becomes the literal flesh of a god, which is then broken and eaten by the community. The Catholic Eucharist, bread made from grain that through a sacrament becomes the body of Christ, which is then broken and eaten by the faithful. The structure, the meaning, the act itself, it was almost identical. So what do you do with that? How do you possibly explain it? Well, the friars looked into their own theology, and to them there was only one possible answer. This couldn't be a different path to God. This had to be a deception, a trick. As one Franciscan put it, this was the work of the devil trying to mimic the Holy Church and counterfeit everything. Teokalalo wasn't just some foreign ceremony. It was a demonic parody of Christian communion. Once the verdict was in that this was a diabolical counterfeit of a holy sacrament, the consequences were swift and inevitable. The great amaranth rituals were targeted for complete destruction. Making gods from Tuali was forbidden. The public consumption of divine flesh ended. In some places, they even outlawed the cultivation of the plant itself. And yet, here's the amazing part, the story doesn't end there. You can shatter a belief system, but a people's connection to the land, to the plants that feed them, that's much harder to break. The amaranth plant survived, and the people who knew its secrets survived. And over the centuries, the sacred flesh of the gods would be quietly reborn as something entirely new. But in countless little homes and villages, the knowledge of how to grow amaranth, how to toast it, how to pop it, how to bind it together, that all survived. The techniques were just too deeply woven into daily life to be erased. They just needed a new reason to exist. And this transformation took a long, long time. By the late 1600s, a new word starts showing up in Spanish documents for an amaranth sweet, Alegria. And by the 1700s, these sweets find a new home. And you'll never guess where, at Catholic religious fairs. The irony is pretty thick, isn't it? So how did it survive? It adapted. The sacred honey of the maguey plant was replaced with cane sugar from the new colonial economy. The grand temple ceremony was replaced by the humble market stall. The life-sized body of a god was replaced by a small portable bar. And most importantly, the sacred heavy name of Tecuali was replaced by the cheerful, everyday name Alegria. There's a story that the name came from the way the little amaranth seeds seem to jump for joy when you toast them on a hot surface. It's a beautiful image, isn't it? And this time, it's not being driven by priests or emperors, but by global markets and modern science. Amaranth is back on the world stage, but it's wearing a completely new costume, an identity that its ancient farmers would never, ever recognize. Today, it's celebrated around the world as a superfood. Its value isn't defined by cosmology or culture anymore, but by its nutritional data. It's sold because it's high in protein, because it's gluten-free. It's marketed as an ancient grain, a label that gives it a nice touch of history, but safely removes it from the complicated, profound, and sometimes troubling specifics of its ritual past. So there you have it, a trilogy of meaning. Over the centuries, this one single seed has been understood in three totally different ways. First, as divine essence, then as cultural joy, and now as nutritional data. The language we use to describe it has gone from the language of theology to the language of emotion to the cold, hard language of science. Just think of the vast emotional distance that seed has traveled. Eating Tecuali was one of the most profound spiritual experiences a person could have, filled with awe and even terror. Today we eat amaranth to keep an eye on our macros and our physical health. You see, the seed itself, it hasn't changed. It's the same plant, the same grain that sustained an empire and embodied a god. The only thing that's changed is us, the stories we tell about it, the beliefs we project onto it. So the next time you're wandering through a market in Mexico and you see a little Alegria bar, maybe you'll ask yourself, what am I really looking at here? What do we truly consume when we eat history? BASTA. This is Mexico. We hope you loved this episode. Your support, just hitting subscribe, makes every difference. It's what lets us keep telling these stories nobody else is telling. We have new episodes every Tuesday and Friday. Don't miss the next one. And right there in the box, there's a story we think you'll want to see.